And we're live, everybody. Blah, blah, blah. Great introduction, Farzad. Well done. Welcome in, everybody. It is Friday, December 13th. Friday the 13th, spooky, all right? 1 p.m. Central. We have a very special panel today. Wow. Look at all these people. We have Hans in a wonderful purple-blue shade. Looks great. It looks like he had a really nice tan. We've got Chuck Cook. We've got Chris from Dirty Tesla. We've got JD from AI Driver. And we also have Omar from Whole Mars jumping on when he wakes up. And we're going to have such a great time talking about full self-driving version 13, what Tesla's working on. The reason why we wanted to put this together is because something's happening. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting, at least. Something's happening in the world of self-driving technology. V13 is a software that has been out in the public with very key people, specifically JD, Chuck, Chris, and Omar. It seems like they are really the only ones, at least with a public-facing audience, that have V13 and are actively testing it day in and day out. And so we spoke with every single one of them on separate podcasts. We had a lot of really awesome in-depth conversations. You can find all those on the channel. But I also thought we could bring everybody together and talk about this thing that's happening together, because there's still a lot to talk about. And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like most people are not aware of what's about to happen. It's sort of the vibe that I'm getting. But we're going to throw ideas around. We're going to talk about it openly. Obviously, we'll have the chat open as well. We'll intermingle comments and questions throughout. We'll figure this out live. As everybody knows on this audience, we're very amateurish when it comes to this. So we'll figure it out as we go. But the people that aren't amateurs are our guests. Okay, so let me tee it off with this question, and then whoever wants to jump in and sort of start us off, go for it. Why isn't this wide? It's so good, right? Why isn't it wide? Who wants to take that on?
I think it's not wide because they said 13.3 and they're sticking to it. That was at the end of October. They said 13.3 is the version going wide. They missed the date because they said around Thanksgiving it was going to go wide. It went to a few of us on Black Friday, I believe it was. But there must be something in there on that little timeline of the features that 13.2 is going to have and that 13.3 is going to have. And they're just sticking to the 13.3, even though I think all of us have agreed that this is as safe or safer than 12.5, 6.3, or 4. You guys agree with that?
What do you guys think? We've seen head shakes. Yeah?
Definitely. It's kind of puzzling because, we've obviously seen, it's so hard to explain. I almost feel like it's a dream with how good it's performing. I almost feel like I'm going to wake up, or one day I'm going to have a drive that's going to show the true version 13 to me, but it just hasn't happened yet. And I'm actually questioning why it hasn't rolled out wider, even as is, even to like just one more group or something, because they've rolled out versions way worse than this. Yeah, so I think Chuck's probably right. They're probably waiting for 13.3. There's a few small things going on, like windshield wipes. I had a lot of those the other day. That I know that drives a lot of people crazy. I think they're ready to just bring out 13.3 and blow everybody away, is what I think they're trying to do.
One of the things that I've been like hypothesizing, have a hypothesis on rather, and you guys tell me if I'm going off the wall here. They are going to launch they're waiting to get it working on hardware 3. So that all the cars can get, okay, head shakes. Chris is just straight up laughing. Chris, why are you laughing, bro?
Well, it's not, it's not, it's just like, I wish, like my first thought was like, man, I wish that was true, but it just doesn't seem, with how much hardware 3 has been lagging, even with version 12, it just doesn't seem realistic. And I really don't want to get people hyped. Like I would be super happy if we all got surprised and Tesla's like, oh, version 13 is going wide, and everyone's like, yeah, right, we're still waiting on hardware 3, and then it goes to the hardware 3 cars. Like, we all want that for sure, but the truth is, like, nobody knows why they do or don't roll things out. There have been times, I always go back in history, there have been times where us OG testers didn't get an update first and other people did. Right? There's been times where the OG testers got it and then employees got it and then it went wide. So there never, ever seems to be a rhyme or reason. If there's some huge issue or bug, then sure, maybe they would hold it back. But, like JD said, pretty much every version we've had is worse than this, and they've rolled all those out. So it is perplexing to me why they wouldn't want to keep going and impress everybody with this. But, it'll roll out. We'll be happy. And then we'll wait for the next version, as we always do.
The one variable we do have is the holiday release, right? That they like to weave in, and they got to get the version numbers right with the .44 build looking like it's got the hardware holiday release in it. And there may be a little bit of alignment of those streams to get them all ready to go to v13. That's just another thought. But there's a lot of AI for cars out there that should be able to run this right now. Back to the hardware 3 thing. As much as I would like to think that's the case, I think it's very unlikely to see that before the rest of the hardware 4s get this version. They're putting in so much time and effort, and those release notes said it was specifically for the AI4 hardware using Cortex. I do think we have some amazing releases coming up for hardware 3. I don't think hardware 3 is forgotten. It may be on the 12.5 build, or maybe even go to a 12.6 on that branch for hardware 3. There's an opportunity there. Now that they're not compute constrained, what they can do with Cortex, I think this is just the beginning. So I really wouldn't lose hope. I don't know that it's going to be aligned with hardware 4 cars for the time being. And oh, by the way, hardware 4 Cybertrucks haven't even seen this yet either. So they're kind of off there on their own too.
So I saw a post you put out there today that you had some ADAS drivers going through your region, as if you live in you have a country to yourself. Can you talk about so what was the car? Was it a Model 3 that was driving through?
There was a 3 and a Y, and the very same vehicles I've posted hundreds of times now. So you're starting to get to recognize the cars and the patterns and the traffic patterns. And my AI script camera caught them. I didn't see them with my own eyes. I just was going through the images before. I thought we would jump on here to see if they were validating anything, because usually if they're validating something, we're not getting ready to get a release today. There's usually a delay in there, unless they're overlapping releases, which they could be doing, but history can only be your guide for so long, and then they'll change it up a little bit. So it was a Highland Model 3 and an AI4, I believe, Model Y. It does have the silver wheels, so it could be a hardware 3, but I think we've determined it was hardware 4. But the only for sure way to know is to either ask the driver or get up close enough to see if it has the red camera lenses inside. So I'm just going to make the assumption it was hardware 4.
So since I spoke to y'all in these last week and a half, however long it's been, has your sentiment changed at all? So the overarching theme from all 4 of you, it's cool how we have all 4 of you in one block, and then Hans and I, the 2 plebs with hardware 3 cars, are on the right. And I'm curious to hear, has the sentiment improved, got worse, stayed the same? Because what I heard from all 4 of you is better everywhere. I can't believe it's not wide. This is one of the best releases we've seen. Not perfect, obviously. It still has some things that they're working through, but they're nowhere near what they used to be, to the point where it's kind of like, again, confusing why it's not wide. Go ahead, Chris. I see you.
Yeah, so I'll say that the sentiment for me is pretty much the same. I keep driving it pretty much every day. I naturally do a lot of driving and the things I have to do, but on top of that, I'm going out and doing some extra driving to kind of play with it. Like, we had some pretty good snow the other night. It wasn't a foot of snow or anything, but we got a few inches. The dirt roads don't usually get treated. They usually just get packed down from everyone driving on them. So I went out there and I turned it on, and it drove on the dirt roads. On the snowy dirt roads, it never slipped. It never had me take over. At one point, I did stop it because it went a little faster than I was comfortable with. But even then, it didn't slip. Like, nothing went wrong. I just, took over because I wanted to. So sentiment is about the same. The issues or bad things that I found are, for the most part, really subjective. Like, it stopped at some train tracks, and there was it shouldn't have stopped there. It was construction. There was a guy holding the sign, and it was slow. It was, we should have moved through, and the car stopped. Is that going to cause like a problem? No, it's just going to annoy somebody for a couple seconds. And then the guy was like kind of doing this, like he was really frantically wanting me to go. So I pressed the accelerator. Like, those are the kinds of issues I'm having now. It's not like it's going to drive off the road or bump into something or anything like that. So for me, sentiment is the same. And that is part of why I'm so excited for it to go wider, because then you can see from people in other areas and different, situations where they do find mistakes, and you're like, oh, I haven't encountered that yet. I'm glad that you kind of posted about this, issue you had, so we can see that it's not actually perfect, or it's not as good as I thought, or whatever. It's really good to get those different perspectives from different areas.
Yeah. JD, what about you? Same sentiment, change?
Yeah. It's pretty unbelievable. I feel like every time I go out in the car, I have these moments that are just like, wow. Like it's one of those things where there's kind of like a honeymoon period with every release where, you get this brand new release and it does a lot of really new, cool things well. And I'm very impressed. And then as I get to know it a little bit better and find its weak points, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is where we're at right now. But every single drive I've had with version 13, even when I'm like, my sole purpose is to get it stuck or to make it struggle in some way, has been extremely impressive. Not only have I had no critical disengagements on version 13, I don't think I've ever even had a hard brake. Even when there's like pedestrians walking out in front of something, like the braking profile is just like the way that it drives is just, I don't know. Like I said, it feels like I'm going to wake up from a dream or something, because it literally feels like this is like you have a personal chauffeur. And obviously it's not ready for robotaxi yet. I've shown issues that it still has in my videos, but the driving style, just every time I take it out, it is beyond impressive to me.
Omar, welcome in, my friend. What about you? Since we last spoke, since we've had it, change of sentiment, improved sentiment, lower sentiment. How are you feeling about V13?
I mean, we just spoke a couple days ago. Since then, it's only really impressed me more. It's not perfect, obviously. There's some minor annoyances. I've had an issue where the windshield wiper's just going all the time. And, the windshield wiper guy's DMing me. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Why don't you go get it cleaned? I'm like, well, in 12.5, the windshield wipers worked perfectly. So, I'm not really sure what's going on here. I've had a greater incidence of sunlight blinding the camera. And it's actually interesting. I tried FSD 12542 on my girlfriend's car. I tried FSD 13 on my car. Did the exact same drive. FSD 12 required an accelerator press to get started. It got stuck. It also was a lot harsher in terms of its braking and its accelerating, but it got there without any takeovers. Whereas FSD 13 actually, threw up the red hands because it was blocked by the sunlight. Same exact condition, same exact road, right? So there does seem to be a little bit of a regression there. But I mean, you just can't believe it when you sit in this thing. Every drive, your jaw's just on the floor at one point or another. Yesterday, I went to the Comma AI holiday party in San Diego. It's about a couple hours away from me here in LA. And literally from In-N-Out, where we got lunch, we got in the car, pushed the button, the thing drove us all the way to the hotel in San Diego, pulled in to the valet area, then drove into the self-parking and stopped there. And then we went back later that same night. It, again, pushed the button. It literally drove us from the hotel, drove out, city streets, highways, everything entirely on its own, going 85 miles an hour, pulls into my neighborhood, pulls into the driveway, opens the garage. And this was kind of the crazy part, because we have a garage with two cars parked really tightly, and it parked just almost perfectly to actually pull into the garage, which is something that I've never seen before. So you have these moments where you're just like stunned. And, that's 5 hours of driving for me yesterday that it just completely handled without any intervention. And more than that, it was smooth. There was no hard braking. There was no awkward moments. And it was just like a professional chauffeur. So clearly it's an incredible update, but at the same time, I think when V12 came out, it took them like maybe, a month or more to get it out to people. I think there's a difference between releasing it to 5 people and releasing it to hundreds of thousands of people, especially when you've got an update that's so confident, right? I mean, confidence is really great when it's doing everything right, but then it can be also dangerous if, maybe there's something that's sort of out of the data distribution. So I think they're probably getting ready to ship it, around Christmas or so. Maybe even, this weekend we could see it roll out wider. But yeah, there's definitely a huge increase in terms of miles per intervention. Safety critical interventions are much more rare.
Chuckster, how about you?
Yeah, I would say my opinion has improved. I always am hesitant to make snap judgments on my first impressions drive or even the first drives after that. So, you know, butts in seats and miles on the road or in the sky are kind of how experience is gained. I would say that I continue, like everyone else has reiterated here, to have these weird jaw-dropping wow moments where I'm like, whoa, what just happened? Because it's breaking my own paradigm of what I thought it was capable of, or at least where it was, right? We all know where this panacea is going, to an unsupervised robotaxi, which means it needs to do everything. But we're marching along this road, and some of the things it's doing with confidence in decision-making and lower latency than we've ever seen before. And I truly believe this is the hardware for a computer that we're actually seeing for the first time use that faster processing speed, you know, the better computer, the more RAM, and a better trained model just specific for this hardware. We're feeling that with these moments. You know, the additional functions they've added, the way I haven't had as many miraculous, you know, 13-point turns like JD has, and I think I've seen Omar do a few too, and they're fascinating to watch because it's so fast. And I've been like so worried that the park and, you know, the park assist speed was going to be the best it was ever going to be at this reversing maneuver. Yet when it's now doing these 3-point turns and these U-turns with this very natural speed and progress, I'm now confident that, you know, that was just the way they built that stack for park assist as a separate app. I have seen a few issues. To reiterate, I had that one very beginning of a drive on my FedEx video where I had the critical hands due to the sun forward camera. But I went out for an hour today at 15 minutes after sunrise going due east on Interstate 10, trying to duplicate it, and I couldn't. So I had multiple clips, and I got a 1-hour video posted on YouTube now, and I'm trying to get it up on X after I redo the codec. But I could not reduplicate the sun issues today. And it was in my eyes so bad, I tried to not put my visor down, but I couldn't safely do that. So I had to put the visor down. I have also witnessed, and I think Chris and a few others have seen miraculous parking jobs at the end of these drives. And I get an occasional one, but that part of the function still seems disconnected, as is alluded to in the release notes, that that's an upcoming feature, an enhanced parking at the beginning and end of the drive. So I'm not expecting that to be working yet today. One of the highlight clips I put on X today, you know, it was at the end of this destination point, and it could have very easily pulled into the right into a diagonal spot, but instead it crossed the road and pulled in perpendicular to the lane lines on the other side of the road. And I'm like, that was weird. So I just left it there. But I let it try to get out of the situation it put itself in while it was illegally parked, and it did a fine job waiting till it was clear, and it backed out and crossed back across the yellow line like it should have to get it back going the right direction. So its ability of recovering and not getting stuck is really, really amazing, because that is where the other people, companies, Cruise and Waymo, that have been trying to go down this path have really kind of looked silly, is when their cars all got jammed up at the end of a cul-de-sac or stuck in a way that they needed a teleoperator to help them. It really feels like Tesla's on a good path to solve some of those in a not teleoperated way. I expect they'll probably have to have teleoperators to get regulatorily approved at some point initially, but I think their program is working good. So to summarize, I can't believe it's not gone wider. There's probably a good reason. It probably has to do with the build numbers and the holiday release being integrated. But my sentiment has solidified the same as I was before, but it's further solidified. I really haven't found anything that I would throw up my hands and say, that's not so good. I did do some school zone testing again today, and I don't think it's seeing school zones based on the times that the signs have. So there may be still a weakness there with the map data. If it doesn't have any school map data, it's not going to do it. It does seem to pay attention to the cars around it, though. So if there are cars around it going slow in a school zone, it does slow down and go the same speed. So those speed profiles are perhaps doing the work there on school zones. A lot of people have asked me about that. So,
gotcha. Hans, let me bring you in because I think what's interesting about, so like, again, Hans and I are the ones on hardware 3, so we're sort of like living through you guys as we're seeing the progress. What's been your biggest takeaway from this development, Hans? Because like if I just bring mine up, it's like it feels unprecedented, you know, especially given how good of a job these 4 guys do being upfront and honest about the performance of it and being very open about the failures and everything. The fact that all four are sort of echoing a certain, and again, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but my takeaway is that it's a very good, very, 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 very good version, right? And it feels unprecedented in the sense that I think this is the first time we've had this sort of consensus around the version. Curious to hear your take of what your takeaways are, Mr. Hahn.
Yeah, I mean, my whole experience of FSD until just several months ago was always watching it vicariously. And so getting to finally, have my Model 3 and drive FSD version 12 is the only thing that I've ever actually had in my car, has definitely helped to expand my experience. But I think that my opinion of where the software is going has always really just been rooted in observing what the cutting edge performance of the models is through y'all. And I don't remember ever seeing a consensus and a level of excitement around the maturity of the software that I see today. And I'm really excited about that. And then, the other part of my perspective has also been just trying to understand the underlying technology and the ability of the architecture itself to really solve the problem. And so I think that is still true, that it seems like the end-to-end neural network architecture is the right architecture. I think that version 12 got us maybe started out as honestly a D to a C execution on an A architecture, and then maybe we ended version 12 with 12.5.4 or 12.5.6, depending on what hardware you run, with maybe a C plus. And then it's like all of a sudden these v13 rollouts start happening, and it looks to me like y'all are having probably an A minus, like an A minus execution on an A architecture. And that is exciting for me to see. Like we almost just skipped straight from decent to like almost there. And that is really encouraging because it shows that not only was the architecture of going end to end in the car right, but now finally having the resources of Cortex, just the much more mature data pipeline to actually feed the training data into the model, the system for doing the training, doing the validation, like everything has gotten a lot more mature over the last 6 to 12 months. And it continues to pay dividends every time we see new rollouts. And so I think that's where I'm excited and continue to be even more excited about what's coming in the future. And since, I still drive a hardware 3 car, like I know that I'm going to have to wait for getting those exciting new software builds on my car. But I mean, that's the same experience it's still better than I don't even have the car and I can't drive it at all. So I'm kind of in hog heaven.
Hog heaven. Would you guys say that's a fair characterization? So sort of that on an A architecture with an A minus execution. Like if you guys were to grade it, like what grade would you give it? Let's go like clockwise. We'll start with Omar. What's your grade for v13? If A plus is ready for unsupervised.
Well, I mean, I don't know about giving it a grade, but I think really what excites me is not what we're seeing in this version, but really the potential. You look at the release notes and half the items aren't even in this release, right? We're getting this performance that we're talking about where, it's driving me for hours. And last night when I was driving home, it wasn't just a simple drive, 2 hours home. There were times where multiple times the entire highway was closed and moved into one lane. And it just handled this completely effortlessly. At one point we were like, oh, wait, why is it, changing lanes over? Oh, it noticed this lane is closing on this curved road before we did. And you're seeing several really important capabilities that are eye-opening. One, utilizing the power of AI4. I definitely recommend everyone upgrade to an AI4 car if they can afford it. They, are really starting to use the power of AI4 now for the first time. And with the higher resolution inputs, you're noticing it able to respond to things much, much earlier. And the increased photon to control latency is also a big jump in safety. Like I've had times where I'm driving and there's a car parked here and the car starts moving. And within like a fraction of a second, before I can even lift up my hand, the thing is stopped. So these capabilities that they've unlocked now with AI4, you really see, okay, if you can respond faster, you can drive safer. And yet we haven't seen the 3x model size scaling. We haven't seen the 3x greater context length. We haven't seen some of the nice to have features like the destination options. So what's crazy to me is not even this build, but okay, well, what's the 3x larger version going to have? What are we going to continue to see come out of the Cortex cluster as it's built out? And, you see this, like one thing I hear a lot from people who who are bearish on FSD is, oh, well, this version's great, but it still makes mistakes. And the reality, of course, is there's no driver on earth that doesn't make mistakes. Humans make mistakes too. But if you have the software and you can see that it's making less and less mistakes over time, and you can just kind of plot that out, in many cases, it is already handling situations with mistakes less often than I do. Like I probably miss the turn and take the wrong path more often than it does. And sometimes if I'm confused about which way to go, I'll turn it on. That's really where you see it starting to eclipse our capabilities. But the crazy part is, this is just the v13 mini. The best updates are yet to come. We haven't really even seen anything yet. This isn't even the polished version for wide release or, the bigger model that we know is coming.
I think that's so well articulated. Like that's the thing that's really blowing my mind. And there was an analogy that I've shared on the channel before that when I'm trying to conceptualize the rate of improvement for this thing, right? Because from the very beginning, it was when V12 comes out and they start going neural nets, the thing that's going to be the most shocking, if it really works the way we think it's going to work, is how fast it gets better, and by the steps that it gets better. Because the capability basically ramps and improves with how much compute and data you throw at the problem. Right? So the more compute and the more data you have, of course, you got to get better with your neural nets and setting it up and all that stuff. But in theory, you could brute force, quote unquote, the solution by just getting gigantic compute capability and gigantic data gathering capability. And thus far, it looks like that is proving out. Not only that, but another example I threw out there is like, okay, so when we see like the Go computers, right? The Go computers or all these neural net based computers that are designed to do a human thing better than humans do it. They're kind of like lagging. Then they get really close, and then it's like God tier within like a year, right? That's the vibe I get with full self-driving. The vibe I get with full self-driving is this year, it's almost as good. 2025, it's going to be like, I can't believe like this is way better than any driver ever all the time, and it's not even close. I don't know if that's going to be right or not, but that's the vibe I get, right? That's the vibe I get. And I don't know if that's hyperbolic or not, but like, is it really that hard to believe that all those improvements that they even haven't put in place yet we're not going to see those next year in 2025? Like, I don't see how that isn't the most likely outcome. Like, that should be the most likely outcome. It's again, like, it just, I think JD, like the way you say it, dude, is like, it doesn't feel real. I don't even fucking have it and it doesn't feel real. Okay? Just like following this whole development, it doesn't feel real. Man, I don't know. Did you, go ahead, Chris. We just threw you in there.
Yes, okay. I'm ready to go. So
Hans is like, go.
if you do want to, that's what I need. You want to hear from me, put me up there. If you do want to, grade it, put it on a grading scale of supervised, because we're under supervised FSD. I would definitely put this one at like a B plus ish or A minus even, mostly because again, it's so complex. Like driving is so complex and there's so many different ways that you can grade it. You really got to be able to step back. And I could never do this, even if I had this to me for an hour talking to everybody. You got to step back and think of it in different ways. But the main way to look at it is objectively, is it moving around the world safely? That's obviously number one. And then number two, in a way that's not like sticking out like a sore thumb or inconveniencing other drivers significantly. Now, you can't fully not inconvenience other drivers because your existence, you're in their way. They'd be in your spot if you weren't there, right? But the way FSD 13 moves around, and it's kind of what Omar was saying, the latency is so much lower. And anyone right now with a version 12 car, if you're driving around on version 12, think about the way it moves around. If you have a stopped car in front of you, as they start moving, if you are, especially if you're focusing, but even if you're kind of half focusing on this, you can hit the accelerator and start going before FSD will most of the time. Because it just has this like lag almost, like it's just behind reality by, it's fractions of a second, but it's more fractions than your brain, right? FSD 13 has really cut this time down. And the way I described it recently in a video was it feels like my FSD car is attached to the car in front of me. As this car is moving up, my car is like scooting up. It's insane how closely it can mimic the movements of the other cars around it in the correct way to kind of move smoothly through the world and get out of the way. When something like a green light or something comes on, there's still a very slight delay, which honestly, I believe is for safety. Because if you're the first car in line, you don't want to just gun it on a green because you never know if someone's going to come through there. And I think that's definitely the right decision. But the way it's flowing around corners, stopping for other vehicles, accelerating towards other vehicles as they move out of the way, it's just like magic. I mean, I can't over exaggerate how good the latency and the movements feel. And then the other part where this comes into play, something that me and Chuck have talked a lot about, is high-speed cross traffic. That was always the thing that I was like, how is this hardware gonna know how to go or when to go when cars are coming at you at 60 miles an hour or more? Because you don't have that much time. Like you can see a car that's a tiny little dot. They're moving so fast. They're going to be on you before you know it. And, I don't know exactly what pixels these cars can see and how they decide like that this pixel's a car and this pixel's not a car, right? When something is that far away. But I have one road where I have to stop at a stop sign. So I'm at 0 and cars are coming at 60 to 70 miles an hour. And you got to just go straight across that road, and not get creamed by them. And even for me, when I first moved to this area, I would avoid that intersection for a while because it was kind of scary trying to get across there. Now hardware or AI 4 with FSD 13 has not messed it up a single time. It just sits there. It doesn't move an inch. Maybe it'll kind of creep up a little bit as it's preparing. And then as soon as there's a gap, you're like, oh, that looks like a good gap. It's going. Now we can move back into the personally. I think it should accelerate a little harder. But even though I'm saying that, it's never done it wrong. It's never done it in a way where I'm like, oh, we're getting a little close here. So you got to work hard to take your driving habits and your expectations out of the equation and kind of look at it from a fundamental perspective of like getting around the world safely and efficiently. And you end up getting a lot more impressed if you can look at it that way.
I think Omar, you were the one that said that it feels like it's reading your mind, right? If the software feels like it's reading your mind. And I think like if from an execution perspective, and again, this is going to be so hard to convey unless people are actually experiencing it. So like what you just described, Chris, to me, like having FSD and kind of, I don't have 13.2, but I know what you're talking about. But I think that sort of thing is the thing that's going to drive to the driver just how aware the car is of its surroundings. So much so that it's going to react almost as quick, if not quicker, than you. So imagine what kind of confidence that instills in the passenger or driver. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you want to jump on. Any of you want to jump on that more? Because I feel like that's like and we think about this thing going wide to more people with V13. To me, that feels like the biggest variable in getting this thing to actually be adopted by the public is that variable of like, look at how fast it reacts to the things around you. That's the thing that builds confidence. That's the thing that sticks with people.
Yeah, it's also just the behavior in general. Like, I think grading it is pretty tough, but I would say, like, some of the stuff that it's doing that I've seen it do, and some of the way it moves around the world, just like Dirty Tesla said, it feels like I would be impressed if this was the last version of version 13. Like I totally expected it to be able to reverse and turn it around and do a 3-point turn at the end of a dead end road and that stuff. But some of the stuff we're seeing felt like it was so far out. Like I would have not expected this to do any of these maneuvers that I'm seeing. Like I'm purposely trying to get it stuck, and it's just not getting stuck. The only time I've ever had to override the accelerator pedal is in the beginning of drives if I'm parked in some weird area. But from then to the destination, the car will continue on its own. And some of the behaviors I'm seeing are just, it feels like version 13 is the first true version that has graduated from the science experiment. I think versions of FSD 1 through 11 were very capable. Some of the moves they pulled were extremely impressive, but it didn't do it in a way that really felt comfortable. And there's a lot of people who would use it and disengage all the time and be like, oh, this is not for me. Version 12 helped out with that a lot when they took over with end to end. I remember Omar taking me, when he was the only one with version 12, he took me for a ride, and I was just blown away at how version 12 handled pedestrians. And version 13 is the true next step where I feel like once people try this, it's no longer a science experiment. Like this is really something special here. And navigating through all the dangerous areas that the car used to struggle with, like in San Francisco, when you're pulling out onto a road and you have traffic parked on each side and there's big trucks and you can't see and there's zero visibility, and my car has a worse view of the situation than I do because the B-pillar cameras are behind me, and the way the car literally creeps out pretty quickly up until the nose just sticks out barely past these cars, and then it does a slow 1 mile an hour creep, almost like showing its intentions to any driver who's approaching that may not be, because it's obviously not able to see it because I can't see it, but it's doing these things that are like, wow, like it feels safe, even though I can't see. Like the way it's approaching these situations just feels so, like, if I feel like once we do have unsupervised driving and people actually take some rides in these cars, it's going to be really hard to order another Uber. I don't think I've ever had an Uber drive anywhere near as smooth as version 13 does all the time, even in stressful situations. And not only that, you got to deal with the driver too, which is a roll of the dice. So like it truly feels, I think that's the best way for me to explain it, is it feels like this is like full self-driving's graduation. You know what I mean? Like it's, or not, I mean, it's obviously not unsupervised, but the jump in performance, I think like I could put my mom or my dad in this car and they would be perfectly comfortable using it. And I would not have been able to say that about many other versions, maybe certain versions of version 12, but version 13 for sure.
Chuck, let me bring you in. I saw you come off mute.
Yeah. 3 points I'm going to try to make here, and I'll put them concisely together. To go back to what Omar said about not giving this a grade, I think that's the right way to say this, because and James Dowman and I have had this conversation, I think even on film, about this training cycle is an exponential. And back on version 8 and 9, I think I was the one kind of saying to James, if we're on an exponential, then we're on that flat end over here on the left edge before it goes up, right? That can still be exponential. You're just not getting the rate of improvement yet because you're still going horizontally. And if you were to put your grade scale that you asked us to initially grade on, that F and that D and that C are kind of still there on that flat end of the scale, but the B is right where it's coming up on the curve, and then the A would have to encapsulate everything else that we have to do on that top right edge of the exponential curve. So there's a whole lot of A left, I think, is the best way to think of this in this performance expectation we can get out of that. I also want to comment on what JD just said with regards to how it feels and how it's stunning us. I think we also got to remind ourselves that we've been running in emulation mode. And any of you that own a computer for any amount of time that have ever taken their computer, whether it be a PC or a Mac, and you try to emulate the other computer using the chipsets that's not designed for it, it's just ugly and slow, so we essentially were crippling hardware 4 since we bought these vehicles, running so that we were on the same branch. And we're effectively just taking it out of emulation mode and getting to see the full horsepower of the machine that we bought. And this is the first iteration of that. We haven't even increased the model size. We haven't increased, the parameter count and things like that we talked about, and leveraged the full size of the hard drive and the model size that we can get to or need to get to. And model size isn't necessarily relevant over time because they probably will shrink down over time. But that's where we are with this data compute cycle. So I think that's important to recognize that these aha moments are our perception of coming out of emulation mode and seeing what AI4 has to offer. So let's take that a step further and say, well, shit, AI5 is already in the foundry and they're already developing that chip. We don't know the cameras yet. At least we haven't seen any leaks of what the cameras on AI5 will be or where they will be. We've seen a robotaxi kind of configured with hardware for. I don't think we should say that is the robotaxi's AI5 hardware. That would be naive to think. So the processing power that AI5 is probably going to be another order of magnitude feeling wise than this is. Just on latency on compute, and the probably things that we'll really notice that it'll be context will get a lot longer, and some other kind of intangibles with the way these AI models kind of are very short-sighted now with their narrow context windows. If that context window gets longer and longer and longer, it'll feel more and more human because we, of course, have the context of experience, a lifetime of experience, or even, the entire drive. And the last point I want to make is a little bit about the hardware 3 people and a comment that was made a second ago about errors. And Omar, you said it right. We all make errors. And I'm going to bring something from aviation in this conversation to say, as soon as you start to think you don't make errors is when you're getting ready to have an accident. You cannot think that way about yourself or your machine. You have to just assume that errors will be made so that you're in the right state of mind when they do. And we have a philosophy called threat and error management in aviation, where we actually talk to the others about the errors that we might make or expect to make, or the threats that are going up so that we can expect situations to happen before they do. While we're driving today in a supervised state, I really encourage everyone to keep that threat and error management model in their mind, to look for the mistakes that humans make and look for the mistakes that the car makes, because you're still working together as a team, just like a captain and a first officer work on the flight every single day as a team in order to make the flight safer. You're still driving in a supervised state. And I do truly believe that even if we don't go unsupervised on hardware 3 or hardware 4 or whatever, the combination of the human and this system is going to improve safety by such an order of magnitude as the software gets better and better and better, that the human's awareness can come away from the tasks of starting, stopping, driving, turning, maintaining a lane, and elevate up to the other factors about what is that car doing. Hey, look, there's a turkey getting ready to cross the road. All these other things that as drivers, we just don't see because we're tunnel vision scoped on the tasks of driving. There's an old video out there about, these people playing basketball, and they try to make you think about what's going on in the basketball game. And then this gorilla walks through the center of the screen. And most people don't even see the gorilla walking through the screen because their brain has been tuned into thinking what they're counting. I think it was like count how many players there are or something like that. And then the gorilla walks through. Honestly, while you're driving, there are a lot of gorillas walking through. You just don't even see them, but the car can see the gorilla, to make that analogy around there. That's it.
Yeah. I love all of that. Does anybody want to jump in and piggyback on Chuck here quick? Because I have a direction I want to take this. That's go ahead, Omar.
Yeah, I think everyone's comments are really interesting. And, I remember when I took that first drive with AI Driver, we did have like a few takeovers, right? So, we really saw this, maybe you could call it an A architecture or a B architecture, certainly a much better architecture. But it was actually worse in some ways compared to 11. I remember when I first got 12, and there was an intersection that 11 handled fine, but 12 just tried to sail right through that intersection. So we were still seeing a lot of rough edges with this new end-to-end architecture. Whereas with v13, it's very, very difficult to find a safety critical intervention. I don't think I've had, many, if at all. And, they're still there. Like Chuck said, still be careful. They're definitely still there. They're just much less frequent. And a lot of the common driving scenarios, it's really tough to find something that's going to trip it up. You have kind of this gut feeling of what it can't handle. So sometimes I look at my car, I go, oh, look at it parked there at the end of the street. There's no way it's going to get out of that. Or when a UPS truck came and pulled right next to my car. And my gut, my instinct of years of FSD testing said, oh, well, game over. There's a UPS truck parked next to the car. It's not going to get out. But then that other angel on my shoulder said, well, why not just try it out and record it and let's see what happens? And usually it figures out a way out. So I think the bottom line is really, this is getting to be a consumer grade product. This is getting to be something that I could now recommend to my mom and for her to start using. And that's a big deal. Even with 12.3.6, they did the free trials. A lot of people said, it's still making a lot of mistakes. I think when they try the free trial of 13, they're going to find a lot of those mistakes have been fixed. It's a much more mature end-to-end FSD.
Yeah, it's interesting you're bringing that up because that's kind of where my head is going. And by the way, for everyone in the chat, thank you so much, everybody joining us in this live discussion. We have 3,500 people watching us live between X and YouTube. Thank you all very much. That piece, that mature piece of software that I don't know if you guys can hear my baby downstairs. He's like screaming from joy. I think he's like having food or something. He must be excited about V13.
He probably checked the Tesla stock.
What is it at? Oh, 433. Look at that. Oh, he's gonna be a happy boy. He's gonna be a happy boy. So that that close to unsupervised/unsupervised piece, to me, the way I view this, the adoption curve for this technology, because I forget who we were talking to, which one of you we were talking to, but it really did feel like right now where we are, I have a hard time understanding why somebody wouldn't be tripping over themselves to buy Tesla and have FSD in their car, because it's become such a big piece of owning a car, is that I don't have to worry about me driving the car. The car just drives, and I'm more of a co-pilot. I'm much more a Chuck Cook of the road, okay? Not in the sky, on the road, all right? I'm like being a pilot of the vehicle. But then you put that unsupervised layer on top of it, it becomes this thing where why would anyone not have this? Well, you don't even have to. I can't believe you put that Oregon hat on. You son of a bitch. You better take that off.
Just for people in the chat.
That unsupervised piece becomes such a huge selling point of the software, because the way I view it is like, even if the software was essentially perfect, but people would still need to pay attention, let's say, I think the adoption for that is 1/10 of the same exact software where somebody doesn't have to pay attention. When we're talking about like a regular consumer, for everyone that I talk to, it's that's kind of on the fence with this technology. I tell them like it's so good, you barely have to do anything ever. You just kind of co-pilot and look around, and the response is always like, yeah, but then I just drive myself. If I have to do this little thing, I have to just watch the road, I'll just do it myself, right? And it doesn't really matter how I don't think how good it's going to be. The turning point, it's once they flip once that unsupervised switch gets flipped. And I don't know if you all agree with that or not. Like that, I think that's what we'll really see this thing take off, is if 13 can get to unsupervised, and then that begins the snowball of like, hey, you actually have a full self, like that word full self-driving. Well, I think when some people read it, they're like, oh, I don't have to pay attention. That's kind of what goes in their head. I think once that goes live, this thing goes nuts. I don't know what this is, but it gets crazy. I don't know if anybody has any commentary on that, but that's how I'm thinking about this whole thing.
Yeah, I can just add really quick. This is really I don't know. It's weird saying this, but this is the first. Okay, so I want to go all the way back to like before we had FSD beta, like just using the basic autopilot and the navigated autopilot. I would, make videos back then. This was 4 years ago or whatever. And it would do the highway, and it would do pretty much the whole highway or all of it or most of it. And it was very entertaining. I was like, wow, this is cool. Like I can come home from work and it drives the whole highway for me. And then it would take the off ramp. That was part of the feature. It would take the off ramp, but at the off ramp, that's where you took over. It doesn't work anymore. You have to do the turn. Autopilot could do straight roads. And I just had this, I was like, I don't know how this thing can't even turn the wheel. How are they going to have it self-driving? Like the wheel doesn't even turn, And then obviously a software update, the wheel turns all over the place. It's not a big deal. Now it was wiggling all over the place and turning like crazy. Now that's fixed and blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to today. This whole time I've been very, and I'm still pretty skeptical on like the Model Y in my garage right now. Am I going to be able to be in the back seat sleeping? I'm very skeptical about that. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. But this is the first version 13, where I've kind of, the amount of things it's doing correctly, you got to keep in mind, like anybody watching these videos, and I'm just going to speak for myself, although I assume it for the others. A lot of times when I'm making these videos, I'm going places that are difficult to find weird stuff, because that's entertaining. We want to see where it's like hard and the car succeeds or doesn't succeed or whatever. In my daily driving, I literally can be in a parking spot, press the little I'm ready button, zoop, and I'm in the next destination. Okay. This is the first time I've really seen that vision and felt that the vehicle is potentially capable of like, wow, I really could, not right now, because it's not appropriate. I really could get to the point where I don't really have to pay attention to this. Meaning a very lowly level of unsupervised FSD could be, and I'm totally just spitballing here, Tesla saying, all right, the vehicle's at a point where you got to be in the driver's seat, but we're turning off the, driver monitor system. Go ahead and text, do whatever you want. You just got to be ready. If the car needs assistance or gets stuck, just make sure, you're around so that you can pull it out wherever it's stuck, or maybe hit the accelerator, tell it it's okay, whatever's going on. So I think that's kind of been my thought as like the first step into this unsupervised thing, which I think is like pretty close to level 3. I know not everybody likes the levels. But it's like finally capable to the point where I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that like, wow, this is actually kind of happening. Again, it's a whole nother 3-hour conversation on whether this car can drive with no human in it from A to B. But you throw teleoperators in there. I don't know. I'm going off a little bit, but yeah, it is that impressive. It really is.
I saw that people come off mute. JD, Chuck, Omar, anybody want to piggyback?
Yeah.
I
go ahead, AA driver.
No, you got to fight now. You got someone's got to.
It'll
we're gonna
just
have
be
to have a
really
rap
quick.
battle.
It'll just be really quick. I just want to point out how interesting of a time we're in right now, because we as full self-driving testers as drivers, we absolutely cannot use our phone in the car. Like full self-driving will immediately yell at you, give you a strike, whatever. And I look around on the highway, because using full self-driving gives me a lot of time to look around, and everybody's texting, everybody's distracted. Even if I was texting you on the freeway, I would probably be the safest car on the road. And I feel like we're in a very weird time, and I feel the same way about drunk drivers. You know what I mean? It's terrible to say that I would prefer a drunk driver to use full self-driving at this point, but I absolutely would. It would save a lot of lives. It's terrible to say that, and it's very odd. It's a very odd thing to say. But people are going to drink and drive anyways. And I think it's a very interesting point in history that we're living through right now, where it's like the car is just starting to surpass, I think, many people's driving abilities. Like I said, it's the smoothest driver I've ever had. It obviously still will make more mistakes, like these weird common sense kind of mistakes that an Uber driver wouldn't make. But as far as the actual driving ability, I think it's probably surpassed a lot of people already. And yet, it's still very, very supervised. So I don't know. I think that's just I just had to point that out. I think it's an interesting point of time we're living through.
That's a fascinating visual. Go for it, Omar.
Yeah. I think supervised FSD is kind of essential. If you drive, you need this. And obviously it's going to continue to get way better. Hopefully they'll remove the driver monitoring over time, but this is a version of the software that has given us driverless rides at 1010. Granted, that was a closed environment. They tested a lot. But the capability of the software, the driver monitoring system is really something they've done for safety. They could easily turn that off and, it's giving unsupervised rides like in 1010. The only reason they have it on is because when it's out in the real world, you don't know what's going to happen. You need the driver to be paying attention. But in cases last night where it drove me to San Diego and back without any intervention, if I had been in the back seat for that particular drive, it would have been just the same. I only needed to be in the front seat in case something happened, right? And these issues are happening less and less frequently. So really, if you are doing long drives, if you have to drive 3 hours and sit in traffic, this is already just a huge stress relief. People say a lot of things, but when you don't have to move your hands and legs, when you can just sit there, when you don't have to worry about missing that turn, it's already just incredibly useful. And it's going to continue to get better and better towards unsupervised. But I really think that anybody who spends any significant time in the car, even if it's just commuting to work for 10, 20 minutes a day, this is going to massively improve your quality of life today. And people kind of think about supervised and unsupervised as very different things. The reality is it's the same type of model. The only difference is it becomes unsupervised once we've validated in the field that it can drive millions and millions, maybe billions of miles without a mistake. Until then, we have to watch it. We're kind of validating it. But from a technical perspective, the model's not really doing anything different. It's not that different of a model. They've taken the software and they've demoed it to us driverless. You can go sit in the back seat of your car with Smart Sum in and see how it works supervised and not be in the front seat. It really is, I think, much less of a hard distinction than people realize. It feels very different when you're, in the driver's seat and being told not to use your phone versus being able to use your phone like in the cyber cab. But this is just an incredible stress relief. I think it's a life changer, even in supervised mode. And I would just tell people, once 13's out, go try it. And even if you're driving a different car, it's probably worth it to get a Tesla just to start using supervised FSD today.
Do y'all think this is going to help Tesla sell more cars next year? Like, is it really that profound of a change where it's going to drive butts and seats? Go for it, Chuck.
I think it's going to sell more FSD for sure. Cars, it feels like Tesla is training its customers to wait on the right promotion and incentive to jump on a car purchase these days. We're sort of training that there's going to be an incentive, there's going to be an interest rate, or there's going to be a rebate, or the federal government's going to change something, so we have to do it by then. I feel those macroeconomic things are going to drive car sales probably a little bit more than this. But I do think the current Tesla fleet will get a lot more FSD subscriptions, probably specifically because of the advent of this. People will say it's ready. I want to come back to say I agree with Chris on the fact that this software branch, in my opinion, will go unsupervised with a driver in the seat. I think that it is there, but I do want to also highlight another threat error management model, that the startle response is more dangerous than supervising. So if you are distracted and you're looking at your phone and you get an alarm or an alert that is not designed correctly, your startle reaction could be more dangerous than being driving and paying attention loosely with a hand on the steering wheel or paying attention to the road. So they have to design that very, very carefully to not induce the startle response, which can induce a pilot oscillation or overcorrection and perhaps even create accidents. So they have to think through that. And we haven't seen anything like that other than the critical takeover, which induces the startle response specifically if you've ever gotten it at high speeds. It's kind of getting AEB, automatic emergency braking. You don't want to hear that sound, and as soon as you do, you're kind of like, whoa, what just happened? Especially if you weren't expecting it. So I just want to make the point. I do think unsupervised can happen, and I do think that 2025 is going to be where we hear about this app, we hear about this hailing system, we hear about how it can integrate and possibly how it could work. I think we have a lot of insurance questions to ask. If we went unsupervised, who's the insurer? Does it have to be a Tesla insurance? Because I definitely know I probably couldn't have a great phone call with USAA and say, hey, I'm ready to go unsupervised. Are you guys going to give me a rate? And they're going to just kind of go, I don't even know how to give you a rate for that. So that's going to have to be solved. Obviously, it's probably going to involve Tesla insurance, which is another vertical integration that was brilliant that they did it back when they did, even though it hasn't gone as wide as perhaps everyone like me in Florida. But I'm not eligible for it here. So those were my thoughts.
Anyone else want to talk about if this is going to really materially drive Tesla sales next year? Like, do you guys see it as that big of a thing? Go ahead, JD.
I would say for sure, using myself as an example, I have a 2018 Model S 75 that has free unlimited supercharging, and I've always been under the Tesla can pry it out of my cold dead hands attitude. I've transferred full self-driving from that car to my Model Y, obviously, and we're paying $100 a month to keep the older Model S on full self-driving. But after version 13, I'm basically pretty much confirmed now. I'm going to upgrade the car to a Hardware 4 Model 3 because my wife is driving hundreds of miles a day. I think the $100 goes a lot further with the Hardware 4 car. As terrible as that is to say, like, I know Tesla has already come out saying that they will upgrade those cars in the future. I think it's all hands on deck, getting full self-driving working in the first place to a reliable level, and then it's going to go back to Hardware 3 and it's like, okay, let's bring these cars up and make them work the same way. I think they have to solve the problem first before they can upgrade those old cars. But as far as just the performance that I've seen, like, I want my wife to have that experience as well. And yeah, like I just crunched numbers all last night, and like the deals right now are insane. So like I almost have to pull the trigger because I really do think it's that big of a quality of life improvement, especially when you're doing a lot of miles.
Okay.
Quick,
yeah.
While we're on the topic of buying new models, so who on the panel has not maxed out their referral credits? If anyone who's watching wants to go pick up a inventory vehicle before the end of the year. So I think Omar, did you max out?
Yep.
Okay. Chuck?
I've only had 2 used, so I got like 8 more left.
Yeah. So how about you, JD?
I only got 1 so far. So
Chris?
How is that possible, you guys? I have 9, I think. So yeah, I'm almost done. So don't worry about me. Use Chuck and JD full show.
You guys got to pump that referral code. Come on, Tesla's giving away free money.
I've never shared it. It just happens.
My link is in my X profile. That's probably the best place to find it. And also for the veterans out there, don't forget, you get an extra $1,000 on top of your referral savings. So if you're a veteran and can validate through ID.me, Tesla just adds that on top. So it's even better.
Hit their profiles now. If you're interested in getting a Tesla before year end. Look at this. See, this is the brilliance behind Tesla. It's like no one's telling anyone to do this. It just happens organically. That's like, and still the thing that's shocking to me is that it's still not well known. This is still something that's very novel, and it's not part of the discourse. I have a very interesting chart I want to show just to sort of highlight this point. By the way, we're an hour in already. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will get to Q&A, I promise. We'll do an extended Q&A for everyone that's watching us. Throw in your questions, throw in your comments. We'll bring up only the best ones, which will be all of them. There is a picture I took of Google Trends just to highlight this. And again, this is super loose. It's not scientific. We do have a scientist here with Chris, so please do not judge my lack of science. What is it called? The scientific approach? What the hell is it called? What's the scientific process? What is it?
Method.
Thank you. See, I can't even say the method correctly. So I did a Google Trends search of 3 terms: FSD, Tesla, and Toyota. Right? So the thought process behind this is like, okay, Toyota is like, if you don't know what Toyota is, you live on the moon. Like you're just not part of society. Everybody knows what a Toyota is. Then there is Tesla, and Tesla is somewhere halfway to the, let's say, the search penetration of Toyota on Google, right? And then FSD doesn't even exist, right? Full self-driving doesn't even exist. I tried different terms. I tried FSD, I tried full self-driving, I tried a bunch of different ones. And FSD was by far the one that was getting the most. Within the context of Tesla and Toyota, it's not getting any search attention whatsoever. So what does this describe? The way I see it is we have a group of psychos, which is us and our audience, right? Who cannot believe how amazing this is. And no one knows that it exists. That's kind of the confirmation I get when I walk around and I bring up the topic with normal people out in the street, or like, in part of my group friends or whatever. The awareness about this is unbelievably subtle. And so what I'm really curious to see in 2025, again, I don't want to paint this as financial or investment advice whatsoever. It's just a very fascinating thing that's happening in the world of automotive. If this software really is as game-changing as we think it is, and it starts landing in people's laps where they're like, holy shit, I just literally can't believe that this is real. I need to tell everyone I know about it once it goes wide, once Tesla starts promoting the hell out of it. Maybe they do a Super Bowl commercial. I don't freaking know, right? So once this starts happening in the sort of in the zeitgeist, I guess, are we going to see the sudden the sudden jump in search sort of interest where FSD and Tesla become synonymous, right? And if that's the case, that's a 50, 100x awareness of FSD versus Tesla, right? I'm just kind of like thinking out loud of what could come down the pike. Does anyone have any I see Chris is off mute. Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to add really quick. It really does have to be like full self-driving, none of this like asterisk stuff. Like if Tesla, again, I think this is far away. It's just my opinion. I don't want to be a party pooper, but I'm going to be honest with y'all. If Tesla gets to the point, let's say they do, where it's like, hey, if you buy a Tesla and you buy the FSD software, you can turn this on. It'll drive you A to B. It'll park you or drop you off at the door and go park itself. You don't have to pay attention. You don't have to do anything. And you got to add on to that. If this is real self-driving and Tesla really nails it, they got to take liability. Okay. That's part of the equation. That means they've solved it. That's kind of been my definition for a long time, is if Tesla says like, yo, if this thing is in the self-driving mode and you don't interfere and it gets a scratch or runs into a pole or something, that repairs on us. We got it. If it gets to that point and Tesla can start talking about that and marketing that, and I mean, they kind of advertise now, still not really. Let's say that word gets out there through me and you guys on here. That I think is where you're kind of heading, where you're getting like, wow, people are going to be like searching this up. They're going to be interested. They're going to be buying cars because of that. If, we're 6 months or a year later and it's like, yo, this is version 13.8 and I haven't an intervention in 9 months, but it's still supervised. Like, that it's not the same thing. You're not going to get a new wave of people. You're going to have the nerds like us that continue to be excited about it and happy about it. And maybe a couple new nerds will come in. But it's not going to be like this huge revolution. And the last part of that I'll add is more people, as this software improves, are getting more into it. So when I know y'all are like, don't read comments, but I read almost all my comments. I can't help myself. I see the progression of individuals over the years with FSD. I have people that comment on my videos for 4 or 5 years have been commenting on my videos. And this same person will say like, oh, this sucks for me. I don't like it. This sucks for me. I don't like it. This sucks for me. I don't like it. And then we get to an update and they're like, whoa, I'm using this one now on my Tesla. Like I resubscribed for the month and this is actually really useful. I'm going to keep using it. And every update, I see that comment again from somebody new several times, and my sample size is not 1 million people or anything, but it's several thousand, or maybe tens of thousands of people sample size. So the increase in capabilities of the system is drawing more people in very extremely slowly. I actually love the data you just put up of the search results. You can see like normal people just don't care, they don't know for the most part. But yeah, if you get to that point of like, turn this on and don't pay attention. Yes. I think you're going to have lots of demand for that. I really do.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that point? Okay. Yeah. To me, I guess my thing is like, if they do execute at that level, I just don't see how it's not explosive awareness, explosive demand. It's like, it's going to be like a 0 to 1 type thing where it's, Elon Musk has described it in the past as the Tesla's ChatGPT moment, right? Where they went from no one knows about it or barely anyone knows about it to it's like a household name in a matter of a week or two, right? I think when we spoke with Chuck, you said like, hey, that's going to be significantly tougher because you're talking about software versus a giant hunk of metal, right? But there is going to be some sort of like, I think even within the car industry, like if you just maybe not everyone, like everyone can download ChatGPT on their phone. Not everybody can afford a car, but the car that people are going to want to buy are going to become significantly. Tesla's going to become a much bigger piece of the pie than it's been in the past because of FSD making that jump, right? Making that sudden jumping capability. So
I think once the cybercab is out there, you can have that ChatGPT moment in a cybercab and then want to go buy a Tesla. But that is your barrier of entry, is to either getting in your friend's Tesla, experiencing self-driving with somebody possibly taking one of the test drives that Tesla is offering if you can get one, or maybe in the future getting in a taxi cab that we hope to have. I think you have to experience it. You know, the wow moment can't happen from watching videos and reading about it on the news or even seeing an ad. It can spur interest, but it's, you know, forking over a car purchase is a significant purchase in everyone's life, and you don't do it very many times. So, you know, it only comes around every now and then. You know, I've said a few years ago that I think everyone's next purchase, an EV, will be one of the options they think about. They may or may not get it, whether it be for political reasons. There's a lot of people are saying that now, or the other side saying I'm going to get it because of the fact I had the electrician over here for my power share installed for my Cybertruck. And of course, these guys are installing Tesla equipment. They're third-party contractors. And they're asking first-time questions. You know, now I'm down here in the South, and a lot of people don't get into those EV things. But I think that, you know, he wanted to see the Cybertruck, and he couldn't believe it when I told him that I wouldn't really necessarily buy this thing because it's an EV. I bought it because of the software. He was like, what? I thought it was the other way around. You're buying these things because they're EVs. I'm like, well, that's kind of nice, but I'm kind of buying this because of the software. And this software could work on a non-EV. It doesn't have to be an EV to do the stuff it does. I think the two go together better, but it's not a critical path for design. So,
right. Go ahead, JD.
Yeah, I just want to mention another reason that might be why people haven't really caught up yet. I think a lot of people's car purchasing experience over the years, they basically, it's very different than Tesla. So when they buy a car, that is what the car is. And a lot of people can't wrap their heads around this improvement that happens over the years of owning it. So like, for example, the last time I put my sister in a car, it was version 11 and it made a mistake. And she talks about it all the time. To her, when you bring up full self-driving, that defines full self-driving, as if the car is never going to get better. And they just don't understand the improvement that happens over time, because it's unlike any other car. There's no other car on the road that is like a computer that you can just update like this. You know, even map updates for most cars, you got to bring it to the dealership and pay hundreds of dollars still in 2024. Like, it is wild. So I think once people realize that, I seriously don't think it's well realized that it's way more like a phone that gets better, you know, with updates over time and all these things, rather than a car. It's literally a computer on wheels.
And starts the day with a full battery like a cell phone too.
Yeah. And the other thing is that free updates. I had someone ask me the other day, you know, how much does Tesla charge you for each of these updates you keep talking about? And I'm like, are you kidding me? You think I'm paying for that? So even that is a barrier that we perhaps need to further break down and go, wait, these are free updates, just like your iPhone. I think the iPhone analogy needs to be pressed, or any phone. It doesn't have to be an iPhone. It's a software update. It's charged in the morning, and it's got an update waiting on you when it's ready. Hans and Farzad, I know you and Chris had a conversation that kind of tails into this about what Tesla can do with incentives, and how those incentives can perhaps get a few more of their current owners to use the system. It might tie nicely into this thread, because I really think that Tesla does have a lot of levers available to them should they choose to use them, if they feel they need those demand levers with regards to incentives.
I'll just say real quick, I don't even think it's an if thing. It's just a when. Like, there is going to be a point where the software is mature enough for them to want to expose it to literally every single driver in the fleet. And once they feel like they have reached that point from a safety, a feature perspective, like everything is all in place, that they'll absolutely 100% just deliver all of, or they will pull all of those levers, and they'll get creative with it. You know, like, they have captive attention in the car for every single person who owns the car. And so their ability to use that captive attention to then sell through free updates or whatever is going to be insane. So anyways, yeah, it's just like, I super enjoy thinking through how Tesla can do that. But I think the even one step removed question of when will they, like, under what circumstances will they finally pull those levers is even more important.
Yeah. It's limitless. Just having the function of having a screen in the car that is vertically integrated with your entire stack opens up, and your entire business is tied to that screen. You can do anything. Credits, supercharger miles, free miles on FSD, reduced rates for insurance on FSD. There's so many different things you can do, right? So here's a topic that I want to hit before Q&A. Licensing. Okay. licensing FSD to other auto manufacturers, right? To me, it feels like this is NACS level penetration that they're going to get. That when you look around, the BMW very impressive thing that they deleted. I don't know if anyone's has followed this on YouTube. There was I think it was one of your videos, Chris or JD. Which one was the one that they jumped on? I think it was yours, JD, where BMW jumped on.
Yeah, it was JD. Yeah,
that's right. So JD had a picture of FSD, and then somebody tagged BMW US, like the BMW Twitter account, X account. God forbid I said Twitter. And then somebody replied to that. Not somebody. BMW, BMW's X account replied to that saying, "Very impressive." Then this thing started propagating through, Tesla Twitter and whatever, and then they deleted it. Right. So that was like, okay, interesting. Then GM drops Cruise, which I think all of us saw coming, especially after they had that terrible accident where they dragged the poor person for like 20 feet or something after they ended up, I don't even know, I forget the details, but they had a pretty big thing. They had an issue. GM drops Cruise. The former CEO of Cruise I think he was a founder of Cruise, and when they sold it to GM, after they dropped Cruise, he came out and said GM are dummies for doing that, right? And then you look at the rest of the automotive landscape. Absolutely no one comes remotely close to what the system that Tesla has in their vehicles. Okay, even if you take a company like Waymo or Zoox or any of the other ones that are operating in the United States that are trying to solve for self-driving, there's no technology company that is capable of giving someone the ability to go from parking spot to parking spot with virtually no interventions outside of some spots with this version that we haven't been able to find all the situations yet. And on any road in the United States, nobody has that. And no one is even close to that, right? So at some point, the door for licensing is going to be completely wide open, to the point where if one person adopts FSD for their vehicle, which will take multiple years to ramp, right? Once one person adopts it, I think everyone else is going to have to adopt it, because it's easy to see how far ahead Tesla is. Now the question becomes: do these auto manufacturer CEOs, do they have the same level of exposure than the broader consumer market, where they're like, they either don't trust the development or they don't think they're going to get there? Just like most other people are out there that are kind of blind to this, which I still to this day find hard to believe, but they've proved me wrong many, many times. So I don't know if y'all sort of think that this is a no-brainer moment for manufacturers to jump on. I see JD, you're off mute. I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I think I may have gotten that poor BMW intern fired. They quickly deleted the comment, and there was somebody posted a LinkedIn profile of one of the people who managed the BMW social media losing their job this month. So that's like terrible. But I think licensing is inevitable, but I also don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think we're going to see a very similar situation play out with like what played out with EVs in general, where we're going, like, they're going to kick and scream the entire way, and we're going to hear about all these other companies about being the, a Tesla killer or FSD killer. Oh, now that this company is going to be involved, they're going to get, they're going to get to the finish line first with all these resources. And, so far every Tesla killer has been cleared of all charges. And I think we're going to see the very same thing with pretty much all I think if you don't have a car that drives itself in the future, even if it's just the best driver assist system ever, I think, it's the value is way less. I'm never like, I think the people that use even just regular autopilot regularly, there's no way they could go back to another car. Like, there's just no other driver assist system that even compares to base autopilot right now, like not even counting all the full self-driving stuff. So I think over time it will absolutely be inevitable, but I think the large manufacturers are going to be kicking and screaming the entire way.
Anyone else want to share any thoughts on licensing?
Yeah, I mean, I do just want to reiterate the fact that, like, Tesla's had cameras in its cars for going on 10 years now, and there still isn't another major OEM, at least not here in the West, who is shipping cars with surround video. Like, What
Yeah.
are you doing? Like, this has been obvious for a long time for people who've been paying attention to AI and computer vision. And I mean, Elon is definitely singular in his ability to see out that far and make such a large bet. But the fact that no one else is even doing that, like, it means that they will have to license. There's not going to be a choice because there's not another solution that can compete with FSD on cost of operation or cost of hardware.
Chuckster.
Yeah, with the existence of companies like Mobileye out there, I think that the OEMs are always going to say they've got a way out or a back door without having to commit to Tesla. If there was a deal announced today, it would probably not impact vehicles till the 2027 year at the earliest, and would probably slide into 2028, my guess, for the year models they do. So they're already behind, but just like they were behind on NACS. And let's not forget how these big OEMs operate. They all made some pretty big moves towards EVs in late in the pandemic. And then their customers basically told them that's not what we want. And they backed into these hybrids, right? So they're also going to react to what their customers are paying for. So back to our previous conversation, if the world isn't searching for FSD on Google, if they don't know what it is and how it's going to change their lives, they're not going to be insisting to their GM and their Fords and their Stellantis vehicle manufacturers to sell me a car with it. So the tail kind of wags the dog for them. It's going to take a bold CEO. I thought we had one in VW until he got fired that was actually going to take the leap for his company. Maybe Farley could be that guy and just say, no, we're doing this. But I think it's going to take a CEO like that to say we're going to license Tesla technology and we're going to partner with them and then go down that road together. I agree with JD. It's going to be a while, but it's going to also take bold leadership to be the first one.
It's just so wild to me that such an obvious thing requires balls. Especially when you're paid to make those decisions.
Well, but didn't Mary just gave up on Cruise? You could argue that her shareholders are kicking her for even trying self-driverless cars now after they lost those billions of dollars. She may have thought she was being a bold leader going, no, we're going in this way. We're going to create driverless cabs. And now her company's the one eating that because they didn't do it or they didn't get it done. So it's a risk for them to be that type of a leader. So I would argue that GM tried and failed. So maybe they're just gun shy.
So, and what's interesting about that, which you alluded to, is is that now going to be the thing? Now, is that the precedent that's set for automakers that says, don't try it because you're going to fail. And then it's will that make them fall? So it's it's the innovator's dilemma to a T. It's so crazy. It's so crazy how good of a proxy the innovator's dilemma has been for legacy automakers. It's been so fascinating to follow. If you haven't read the book, The Innovator's Dilemma by, oh my God,
Clayton Christensen.
Thank you. Hans is dude, that's why he's my co-host. This guy's faster than ChatGPT. Just insane. Okay, do we want to hit anything else before we go to Q&A? We do an extended Q&A. Chris, JD, Hans, Omar, Chuck going once, going twice.
I just want to briefly point out, just real quick, just
go for it. No, take as much time as you want.
Yeah, real quickly.
Take your time, bro. You got the cool sign in the background. You can take it as long as you want.
Thank you. Everybody talks about how many millions or billions of miles full self-driving has to go without making a mistake. But I think not a lot of people want to accept the reality that driving is probably the most dangerous thing we do every single day. There are 12 people who are not going to wake up tomorrow because of a mistake that either they or somebody else made on the road. Not in the USA, not in a week, but today in just California. 12 people are going to lose their lives because of mistakes of drivers make. So I don't think we have to have a perfect system to get to driverless. And I think driverless may actually happen a lot sooner than anybody thinks, especially with my experience with v13. Even with the non-ideal camera positions behind the driver in the B pillar, the vehicle's behavior with those problems that it has, I guess, is just, it really feels like something special. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention, that it's not going to take a lot to be considerably safer than a human. And while it still may look like the car is making a lot of mistakes, because the mistakes human makes are a lot more. usually more dangerous. With all you have to do is travel on a California freeway for any period of time, and you will see very easily why self-driving cars need to take over quick, because we need to get the people that don't care about driving off the road. We need to put them in the back seat so they can scroll on X.
Yeah, such an excellent point. And I think one can hope that the regulatory environment for the next 4 years is complementary to that fact, and they act on facts to actually help society not kill itself, quite literally, right? One more thing I want to hit before we do Q&A. Guys, this is like the endless sort of waiting for Q&A. I promise I'm not doing it on purpose. One of the things that I've been thinking through is because of how FSD learns, right? That the capability of Tesla to copy and paste FSD between regions feels like it's going to go a lot faster than maybe I previously thought, right? So dropping a US car, just being able to unleash FSD v13 unsupervised on Europe, right? That's not like a 2029 thing. That's like hey, they might have it solved by 2026, 2020, perhaps at the latest. And then it's just up to the regulators to unleash it, right? So it's like, maybe it can work in China next year, in 2 years. Maybe it can work in South America next year, in Argentina, like in all these different places, right? Because of how the software learns and because of how it's set up, it behaves like a human brain, right? And I use this example on X. When I go to drive to Ireland, when I take a trip to Ireland and those maniacs are driving on the other side of the road, not like the United States, damn it, right? They're driving on the wrong side of the road. They have all these crazy looking signs that I've never seen before. I don't have to take a test. I can just figure it out. Why? Because I just know how to drive. I've learned how to drive, right? Even if the steering wheel and pedals are on the wrong side and the stick shift is with my left arm instead of my right arm, right? I still know how to drive because it's driving. It's just I have to I use the usual context clues that I use driving to drive. And v13 neural net system is exactly the same way. And I think that's another very exciting thing about this development is like, hey, this is not just a US phenomena. This is going to happen globally much faster than people realize. And it's going to be down to the regulators to really open this up. So in places like Europe, the technology could be there way before the regulators are. But there is a comment that we got that actually sort of points to this. And maybe I'll use this to get into Q&A before check in to see if anybody else wants to mention anything on that point. 1, 2, cool. Okay, so Switzerland will open the roads for, how do you pronounce that? Autonomous driving in March 2025. So we already have a European country that is writing regulation to allow this to happen. I think I saw this either last night or this morning on X. Does anyone have any commentary on this post?
No,
Okay.
Just that I agree with you. We've seen a hacker hack an old version of version 12, and it just drove European city streets, which I thought was crazy, even like showing the full visualizations of all of the streets around. And yeah, I think, I'm proud of the regions. They're finally starting to wake up. I think they're also getting a lot of pressure. Like I get a lot of comments from Europeans on my YouTube channel, and they've gone from impressed to pissed off at this point, and I think they're demanding that something comes pretty soon. I think it's about time.
Yeah.
I was just wanted to say the European roads are also better than ours and more ready for it. So
True.
It is going to take leadership, and I think governmental leadership and regulatory leadership will open the door. It'll happen sooner for them than it will for the UK, for example, because they've already started to work on these laws, and it would let Tesla get in there, I think, even sooner if Tesla is one of the ones that does that. But maybe it'll be another company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that regulatory leadership on the part of a country like Switzerland will definitely accelerate the rest of the EU.
It's a very good place to do it too. I feel like in Europe, like Switzerland, high GDP per capita. They have a very super high level of what's the word I'm looking for? Infrastructure, right? So it's like a very conducive place to happen. And then what's going to be interesting to see is like if Tesla uses this as a springboard to get FSD into Europe, And then it turns out like Switzerland is already an incredible country. And then it's like, hey, and by the way, you don't even have to drive anymore when you go to Switzerland. You just land at the airport and you just go anywhere with a cybercab. Like, bro, like all of Switzerland's roads are cybercabs. Can you imagine? That'd be sick. It would be so sick.
They might surpass Norway in EV miles pretty quickly if they do that. And I think Norway is going to be another one of the linchpin countries. Like if they go, that'll be big.
Yeah. Real quick, shout out Jay Lizard for the $2 super sticker. Thank you. And thank you to Gobble and Alien Abducted by Humans for becoming a YouTube member. Thank you so much. And to Lord of Pharaoh. These subscribers are awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate your support. $10 super chat. Thank you very much. On Unexpected Fire. Could Chuck's sunlight issues be from the sun being at the right angle and the sunlight repeatedly hitting the car, then going behind the tree? The dappling messes up FSD. Do you think that could be the issue you encountered?
I have heard some other folks talk about trees. I think actually Miss Delia, even on X, has made a comment that there's a combination of sunlight through trees when it's direct sunlight that does have some shadowing and some other examples. The fact that I couldn't duplicate it with bright on sun means either there's another variable or it's just got a probabilistic, time when it happens. I'm not really sure yet. So I'd say to this commenter, you might be onto something, and I'll start paying attention to the bright sunlight through the trees. Lord knows I have enough trees around here, so I just got to get out the right time of day and point the right direction.
Yeah, I would say that matches with my experience on version 12, that when I do have, there's a specific road that I drive that's kind of into the sun at a little bit of an angle, and it tends to be in that exact scenario where it's coming through trees and then going away and then coming through trees again, where that's a situation where I have the car freak out more often than just direct exposure to sun.
I gotta bring this up. Omar, smile. Omar is smiling, but on the inside. I think knowing Omar a little bit, I think that's probably pretty accurate. Let's hit Jeffrey here. $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. My parents thought FSD was just for a specific upcoming car. They didn't realize it is available for everyone with a Tesla already. And I think what's very interesting about that comment, it talks about that knowledge gap, right? That knowledge gap that exists out there with this. Any thoughts here from the panel on this comment? Kind of rehashes so many different levers Tesla.
Yeah, I think we just need to encourage everybody to take advantage of every free trial. Don't be biased about your last experience. Go into each one with a new and open mind, because it really is changing. And maybe just watch a couple new videos if you don't believe us, that it really is changing. The people in my circle, trust and listen to me and try it, but they're all still not into it. A lot of people like to drive Teslas. It's a fun car to drive. So there's a little bit of a barrier there to say, well, why would I buy a performance Tesla if I'm just going to turn on FSD all the time? And you do kind of, that's a good point.
Yeah. Let's do this one here. We also have not seen v13 on SNX. I suspect they have not turned the control stack yet. Yeah, I think it's just Model 3s and Ys on hardware 4 right now that have it, right? I mean, there's literally just 4 cars. It seems. Do we know if there's anyone else that has v13? Have you guys talked to anyone else that has it?
I have not.
No, I think it's just employees, but it does seem that that's true, that it's only going, like, as of now. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but from what I understand, it's just 3 and Y, and it was actually almost going to be just Y. And Tesla does do something with this where they focus on the Y right now with hardware 4, because it's the most populous car, right? They have the most Ys out there, and they're focusing on hardware 4. And then 3 closely follows that, of course. And then the others, I mean, we even saw it, in the at the presentation at the Robotaxi event, where Elon's like, yeah, we're going to have unsupervised Model 3 and Model Y, woo. And then people are like, it's Cybertruck, like what? And he's like, yeah, that too, it's kind of like a weird moment there for a second of like, why did you specifically say, why would you even say the models? Why don't you just say we're going to have unsupervised in Texas and California? And even me and Chuck on the Cybertruck and Omar, I don't know if Omar has the same experience, but like, you can tell it's not. I'm ragging it a lot on X. It is not as good as the other vehicles. Cybertruck FSD is so goofy. But sorry, I don't want to go off too much. Focus on the questions, but
you're good.
Yes, there's definitely something to that. They focus on 3 and Y first for sure, because it's the most populous car.
Yeah,
So-
I would say. Oh, sorry.
Just a
Um,
question for the panel, real quick on that specifically. Do you think that might be a factor in why they haven't rolled out V13 wide? Like, if you're only rolling wide to Y, or if that's the main focus of the development build, maybe that's why they need to wait till 13.3.
I would say for sure. When you push the car to the absolute limits and you try to get it stuck in certain situations, you can feel, or at least I feel, that the model is very finely tuned for the exact size of the car, of like a Model 3 or Model Y. There are situations in the video that I just released in San Francisco where if we were in a Model S or an X, we would have hit the wall. And if we were in a Cybertruck, it would have been like the Kool-Aid man busting through the wall, like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like it would be a disaster, honestly. So I honestly do think that could be a reason. I think version 13 could perform very, very well on S and X and Cybertruck, but I think it's going to have to be more supervised than a smaller car like a 3 or a Y.
Okay. From Tomas, thank you all. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate you. This is an interesting one for the Chuckster specifically. Please ask Chuck, have his views adjusted with B-pillar camera location? In other words, after having experienced V13, can it get to unsupervised with the current camera configuration?
Yeah. So my actual stance has not changed, but if you didn't hear what my actual stance was that I've been repeating for the last few years, is that we're not going to remove the driver unless they constrain the environment. And I think that this year, or 25, that they will constrain the environment and allow it to be unsupervised. I hope I'm wrong. Creeping does work, is in most areas, but the world's a big place, and I just don't know that it works in all areas. Is it safe? It is safe in its current implementation, but it's still trying a hard maneuver versus turning right in some scenarios or things like that it probably needs to start doing. Listen, the B-pillar is behind my head. I can have better visibility as a driver. Maybe the latency being so low that the Tesla says, well, it doesn't really matter. We're better than you, even with our B-pillar that can't pivot and rotate behind us. So my stance hasn't changed. I do think we're going to be in a constrained environment, have driverless with the B-pillar. So I'm just kind of waiting to see what AI5 really is. And if AI5 has a B-pillar with no changes, I will probably just say either I'm wrong or this is going to take a while. My stance hasn't changed, and I'm not, but it is much, much better. I do think we're going to get unsupervised in the car probably this year in a constrained environment, probably Palo Alto and Austin.
Okay, let me open this up to the panel. Do you all agree with Chuck that Tesla will not get to a unsupervised state without a driver in the driver's seat with the current camera configuration? So if you agree, raise your hand.
In an unconstrained domain.
In an unconstrained domain.
Don't forget, unconstrained is the real caveat there, right? It doesn't take much for them to constrain the domain, and it'll work, right? You got a map, or you got a road, or you do a boundary like Waymo. And so in the complete wide open, the world is your oyster, I don't see it. But honestly, they may never deploy unsupervised that way. They may always say, well, we're not going down these roads or that type of road. And if you live at the end of one of these roads, you're going to have to drive it out to the end of the road before you can turn it on. I don't know.
Chris, I saw you raise your hand. What's
yeah, I mean, it's just, I'd love to be proven wrong. I say this all the time. That's part of being a scientist, man. You're just wrong sometimes. And if I want Tesla to prove me wrong, but it just feels like with the angles the camera has, the distance it can see, which has started to be proved wrong to me already with version 12 it started with, and now it's continuing even better with version 13. But the distance it can see with those cameras, the positions they're in, I just, I don't understand it. Tesla knows more than us. That's always the first thing I want to throw out there. They know 100 times, 1,000 times more than I do about all this stuff. But if we're talking about, one of the things that Tesla likes to talk about and that I like to harp on is the car's looking in all directions at all times. And that's part of why it's so much better than us. Why can they not have the cameras a little farther forward, looking sideways, so it's, again, better than us in another way, right? And there's just these situations where you have a building and you're trying to turn and you can't see until your nose is out in the road. And I don't understand how it gets there. Now we have the reverse capability. Maybe it goes choop and it scoots back or something weird. I don't know. Tesla may have an answer that surprises me. I'm open to that, but
and they can solve it with those tricks, but it just keeps banging in the back of my head if that's an inferior solution. And I'm not. Elon has always said this, keep adding, keep removing, keep deleting until you get it right. And they're just not doing that with our equipment right now. They're just only deleting with the radar and the ultrasonics. I still miss my ultrasonics, although vision is getting better. It's definitely not as accurate. If you go up really close to a pole, that vision system isn't going to keep you from hitting it. Well, it won't let you get very close. I should say that. It'll keep you from hitting it, but it gives you, 6 inches or a foot of distance where you may only have 8 inches you need.
Right. Well, and you can see, because of the no front bumper camera in our Model Ys, you can see where, I just posted something the other day where I put a garbage can in front of the vehicle, and it was rendering that object in the hood of the car, which obviously is not correct, but that's what the vision has to work with at that point. And I'm very glad we have the front bumper camera on the Cybertruck, but for now, I just feel like they put it there for us for off-roading purposes, not exactly for FSD. But of course the Cybercab had it too, which I was very thankful to see. Very, very thankful that was on there. So hopefully that'll get integrated soon and make this, again, even more superhuman. It's like the thing is better than me in terms of its awareness. I get that for sure, but make it even more better than me than it already is. So yeah, it's a sticky subject for me.
Yeah, I will agree with what they both said, where it is technically an inferior camera position. But what I've always said about this is there are cars on the road today, mainly sports cars, that have a vastly worse position, a much longer hood, and a worse view out of the car than the B-pillar camera has on these vehicles. And those vehicles are driving our roads every day, and they're able to do so safely. I think it's much more dependent on the vehicle's behavior. Another thing that I don't know, I haven't had enough experience with it yet, but on hardware 4 cars, the repeater cameras have a much wider field of view, and it's nearly 90 degrees. And it drove me crazy. I was like, why wouldn't they just extend that another 10 degrees? Because it can almost see, if you pull straight up to an intersection, it can almost see incoming traffic. But all it has to do is just turn a little, just angle itself 5 degrees to the right, and suddenly that camera has a much better view than we do of the car. And there has been situations where it's pulling out onto roads where that camera has a much better view of the situation than I do. So I think, I don't know how they're training it, if it's off human behavior, but I think once the car, like we saw with Go, where it starts doing its own thing, and instead of learning off human data, I think we're going to see maneuvers like that, where it's purposely putting that camera in a much better spot to see, and then suddenly it has superhuman vision with hardware 4.
Omar, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just really hard to argue that there's something wrong with the camera placement when it's just doing hours and hours of drives without interventions. Because, if there is some big flaw in it, it appears to be very rare. It's already doing all the drives. And, we've had this discussion for years about, when Chuck started doing his left turns, and people said, well, it's because the camera placement is so bad that it can't do it. And, even if you can see that there may be some truth to that, what I said is, look, the software could be dramatically better. And the software has improved so much, right? We don't always see everything, but we're intelligent enough to know what we can see and what we can't see, even to, maybe turn right instead of making a left turn if we go, I just can't see, right? So I think there's been an incredible improvement in the software. I think the software is going to continue to improve. A lot of times when people say, hey, well, why not put a camera, let's say, in the front of the car facing sideways, or maybe in the mirror or something? The camera placement they've chosen is really to mimic what we see, right? So we have the front cameras, we look out the window. We have the rear cameras that matches the rear view mirror. And then the side cameras kind of match what we see looking out the window or looking through our rear view, our side mirrors. So, when you have a system like an end-to-end system where you're really training on human behavior, there has to be kind of a matchup, at least as close as you can get, between what the car is seeing and what the human's seeing. And you want to drive like a human. it doesn't really make sense to just stick the nose out of the car rather than creeping all the way, because the supervisor does also still need to see. So, they have every opportunity, unlike, Waymo and others, to do whatever they want here. They make the whole car themselves. They design the whole thing. They've already done an AI4 revision. They're going to do an AI5 revision. The AI4 cameras do have a bit of a wider field of view. If they're seeing in their data, hey, this is a source of interventions, absolutely they can change the camera. But, in my experience, it's just driving me around, all day, thousands of miles, hours of driving. Not once am I seeing any issue where I said that's a problem with the field of view.
Yeah. Differing opinions. I think that the interesting thing about where we are now is that we're about to see who's right. We're about to see who's right. Anybody want to make any bets? Do we have who wants to be the bookie? Hans, you want to be the bookie?
I'm gonna bet Tesla knows what they're doing. That usually that usually works out.
Seems to be a reliable way to predict the future here. All right, let's go for about 15 more minutes, and then we'll call this a sucker a wrap. From our brand new subscriber to the channel, thank you so much. €20 super chat, right? Yeah. When will FSD be able to drive safely through the millions of different construction zones? People can learn to do all of them by driving, let's say 20 construction zones. Today's AI architecture can't generalize like this. Do you agree with that statement? Okay, I see a head shake from Omar. You want to go first?
Strong statement.
Yeah. Who wants to take this on?
I mean, it can handle construction zones. It can handle them pretty well. I talked about yesterday the entire highway closing. And, it's been a challenge in the past for sure. Construction zones can be unpredictable. But with v13, I'm not going to say it's going to handle every construction zone perfectly. But construction zones are no longer something you really have to intervene for a lot of the time. It just does the right thing.
Let's not forget the v13 bullet that talked about fleet sharing data on this specific issue with detours and things like that. So that is another opportunity that could extend to potholes, closed roads, everything, even inference and reading speed limit signs in school zones. Maybe one day that data will be shared. So to add on to that questioner's comment and what Omar said, we have new capability. That's a new capability, sharing data with other cars to avoid those scenarios if it's going to save time. And I think that's a huge part of this.
I would also argue that it doesn't have to be going through millions of construction zones perfectly. All it has to do is be better than a human. And that is not very hard to achieve. Just go up to a construction worker or a construction flagger and ask how many crazy humans they've seen do the wrong thing or get themselves stuck or have to turn around or do all these per day. Like, humans aren't very good at getting through construction zones. I don't think training FSD to do at least as good as that and then call home for help when it can't do it is much of a problem.
Yeah, I would say that even version 12 was doing construction zones really well. That was one of the things I saw a huge jump going from 11 to 12 is getting through these different construction zones. And the only problems I've had and we got a lot of that in Michigan, the only problems I really had with 12 and once now with 13 and construction is just a little too hesitant. Which is what you want anyway. You want to go super slow through those things. I had somebody one time tailgating me like crazy when it was a 1-lane road and there's construction workers everywhere. I'm like, dude, 12 miles an hour is plenty fast. There's people standing 3 feet away from us. You know what I mean? Slow down. We don't need to go 30 miles an hour when there's a person 3 feet from our car working. They're not looking at it. What if they fall backwards? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many things. And it's handled them really, really well. And the only time I've intervened is again because it's just a little slow and I'm in control anyway, so I take over. If I wouldn't have done anything, what would have happened? The car would have sat there another 10 seconds and then went. I mean, yeah. So construction zones have actually, in my experience, been excellent for all of V12.
Real quick, Jeffrey Lutz, shout out one of the best voices regarding Tesla. He's a regular on Herbert's channel. Jeff, we got to have you on our channel, bro. You haven't been on our channel ever, I don't think. So I'm going to reach out and get you on maybe next week if you're available. Fantastic operations guy for sure. Alvin, I'm an employee. I'm assuming Tesla, and I've been enjoying it. So this is FSD v13. So that's awesome. Can you DM me every secret you know? Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts about this. Should there be an external indicator for other drivers when self-driving is being used? And I'm assuming it's unsupervised here. I'm seeing head shakes no. Okay, who wants to take this first?
My view on this has changed quite a bit, but I think the only thing an indicator is going to do is have people bully the car on the road more than it already is. So I think that's all I can say about that. I've thought a lot about it, you know, some type of like I even know when you use summon mode, it uses the rear fog lights and it turns on the lights at all times just to increase visibility. And I was like, oh, maybe that might be cool, you know, give some indication that the car is in full self-driving, but humans are just not to be trusted. I want the car just to behave as human-like as possible and blend in. And that's what it's been doing really, really good at lately.
You mean you don't want to get spray painted or have cones put on your car?
Yeah.
Seems like a reasonable request.
Yeah. Humans, man. Jesus.
All right, let's do a couple more here. We got another. Oh, JD, wow, you look great. Oh, the aliens took him. Might want to check your camera or your capture card or something. This has been great. Thank you, Scott. You are great, my friend. The question from Greg: do you think the route planner map data will be what holds FSD back? And this, I think, Chuck, we've brought this topic up before. What do you guys think about this? Maybe
I think the route planner has some improvement, but you're starting to see Mr. Hyden, Dr. Jekyll a little bit with FSD vision and the planner a little bit. And I've seen it on everybody's videos. The planner wants to go this way and FSD goes that way. And it's kind of like, who's in charge here? And it seems like they flip a coin. Who gets to decide sometimes? So I do think there's some improvement that can come here. With V13 and even the late version of V12, the earlier and more natural lane changes helped the situation to where the car was in a better situation to follow the planner. And so I do think these are small improvements to get it going the right direction. And then, of course, the planner has a whole lot of work to do in the look at what we're doing here, Farzad. Nice job. The planner does have a lot of work to do in the kind of the parking garage, parking lot sort of world, right? And in that world, I think is where we truly get to see what the vision system wants to do without a good, perhaps route, just following its way along. So I think this is a good area. I don't feel like it's very far off. I think the car getting in a good position with earlier, more natural lane changes allows the planner's routes to be followed more effectively.
Yeah.
I would say this is a data point that I'm actually very interested to continue to watch because, there's a number of different ways that Tesla can solve this problem. And one of them is just to make the quality of the neural nets better. And, to Chuck's point, actually include the ability to actually read those signs. Ultimately, I think that's the right solution. But there are also less first principles ways to solve this where you just have a lot better map data. If you have a lot better map data, that allows you to have a better route planner in the first place. It's a lot more lightweight. It runs in the car on FSD hardware 3 or whatever the older versions of the hardware are going to be better. Maybe they do both things, but I think that whatever Tesla's solution ends up being to this problem, that will be a really important data point to show us what direction are they going in and really how close are we to fully unsupervised.
All right, let's do two more, and then at the top of the hour here, bottom of the hour, is 3 o'clock technically the top or the bottom?
It's 2 till 3, as David would say.
Oh, right. If David was here, we keep reminding him that the Brits lost America. Last time you were briefly discussing how to call today's presenters, the 4 OG FSD testers. What about Fantastic Four or Magnificent Four? Do y'all have a nickname for yourselves? You four? You should.
I think they're the 4 automated horsemen.
Ooh.
Well, let's not forget this OG group has kind of changed shape and size. Honestly, not at all of our understanding of how they chose, right? There was a much larger OG group that has been whittled down and against some of those folks' wishes. So I don't know, maybe we're giving them the feedback they need. I know the positive feedback I got at the We Robot event from the engineers felt like why I'm still here is because they felt like they were engaging with the feedback I was giving through the camera. And maybe that's how they said, you know what, let's whittle it down so we can focus with people that are both constructive and, you know, also have some reach. I think reach matters a little bit too.
Yeah, I think the way I perceive it is y'all four have by far the most consistent content created around this. I mean, y'all have literal audiences that look for your findings, and then y'all spend a lot of time putting and crafting those videos together, which is both. And I think this is like, again, like we talk about this, what makes Tesla so unique. How many companies would hide this? Would try to hide the mistakes or whatever that the system is making, and Tesla is actively encouraging an ecosystem to be birthed from highlighting the mistakes. Talk about coming up with some sort of system that really speeds up the ability for the company to find the mistakes, right? And again, this is why this discussion is so fascinating to me, to kind of put a bow on this, is the consensus positive tone from the group of people that go out of their way to expose the failings of the system. That is my big takeaway from all these conversations. And again, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. Okay, we'll wrap it up here. We're 2 hours in. I don't want to steal your time for the rest of the day. Real quick, for those that do follow the stock market and the stock, not financial advice, obviously, but Tesla just closed at an all-time high once again of 436.23, which is 4.34% up, $18.
What time was that last increase? Was that right when your podcast started?
What was it? So we started at 1 p.m. Central.
2 Eastern. Where's 2 Eastern?
Right there. Look. So you're welcome, stock market. You're welcome, Tesla investors. This is all us. Thank you very much. Okay, any parting words from the group before we wrap the sucker up?
I want to say one thing, and I'll let the others chime in too. Watch what the leaders of Tesla say. They are not looking at version 13.3. We had We Robot with 13 pre-version back in early October, and they had been testing that for months. When you see Elon and when you see Ashok talking in superlatives about this is game-changing, they're probably looking at V14 or they're looking at V13.8, which is runway we have no visibility into. When they go silent and nothing happens, that probably means they're running behind and they don't have much to say. But when you see them just tacking on superlatives, they know more than we do about what is being tested right now that just could be game changing. So I just say cue off of those words because they're probably a little bit more insightful than we realize.
Omar?
When it's out, go try it. You know, we can talk for 5 hours. You won't believe us until you just sit in the driver's seat, you push the button, and see it take you from parking spot to parking spot on its own.
I like this one too. Legion of Drivers. That's a good one. Chris?
Yeah, I'm just gonna shoehorn this in here because I wanted to add it, but I didn't. I kept forgetting. We're not gonna get perfect driving, you know. So keep that in mind as you're watching the videos and experiencing it yourself. It is gonna get better and better. And again, the mistakes that we harp on are so minuscule compared to what you were seeing 2 years ago. I do encourage people go back and watch the old videos. It's madness. I mean, it's madness. And even, you know, I did that Waymo drive a couple of months ago, and Omar has a lot of Waymo experience. At one point, it jammed the brakes and like randomly switched lanes real hard. It was crazy. The whole, I mean, me and Stephanie went like this, and it was like, what is happening? And that thing's on the road. There's no driver. And guess what? It wasn't that big of a deal. It didn't cause an accident. It didn't even probably get in anyone's way doing that. So going forward, being nitpicky, trying to challenge it, we will be able to find these things, but just keep the, you know, the overall picture in mind that it is getting better, and it's getting 13's a big jump. It's very impressive.
JD.
Last thing I'll say is one thing that I learned at the We Robot event, talking to a few of the engineers, is it's not just feedback from this specific group that they look for. They're honestly all over the place looking at feedback from everything. So if you get this, if you're experiencing issues that we're not, like, that's kind of what the Tesla team is looking for, and they do read everything. I can assure you they're watching the videos, they're reading the comments. Even if you don't think you're a big channel or something, they're watching.
Like and subscribe, Tesla employees. Come on now, boost the small channels. Hans, do you want to say anything before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I would just say the incentives right now are insane. Like, it's never been easier to get into a Tesla. Between, $1,000 off of 3 and Y, $2,000 off of S and X. I'm not even sure what the bonus is on Cybertruck. To Chuck's point, the veterans credit leases, I think, are $300 a month for Model 3. Used Teslas have never been cheaper. I purchased this year for under $25,000 a Model 3 2018 with FSD. So I got the FSD package. Those deals are out there and available. I think that, I'm really excited to see what the lineup looks like in the beginning of next year. But I think that this might be one of those points in time. Maybe we shift 3 months one way, 3 months the other. But I think the accessibility of buying a car that actually has FSD at a really affordable price is probably going to change sometime in the next 12 months. And so if that's something that's important to you, you might want to think about what it looks like to try and make that happen sooner rather than later.
And then from my standpoint, we're not even talking about the bot. That's the thing that like just melts my brain, because the bot is powered by the same damn thing, right? Loosely, but you all know what I'm saying. Okay. Thank you very much, Chuck, Omar, Hans, JD, Chris, Chuck Cook on YouTube, Chazman on X, Omar, Holmar's blog on YouTube, and Holmar's catalog on X. Is that right? Yep. Hans C. Nelson on YouTube, at Hans C. Nelson on X, AI Driver on YouTube, at AI Driver on X, and Chris, Dirty Tesla on X and YouTube. And if you're here, you already know where I'm at. Thank you so much. Appreciate y'all. Good night.
Bye, everybody.